The reality is, as a law enforcement officer, we're in combat 24/7. There really is no safe area. Every single contact that we have, every single call that we respond to is a potential deadly or lethal threat. And I don't think most of the public realizes the toll of that. We have to change the culture. We have to make it okay to not be okay. Recovery is different for everybody because we really are unique, and we really need professionals who understand the things that we have to deal with and the impacts on us.
Michael, welcome to the Point of Impact. I'm really glad to have you here.
It's my honor. Thank you for having me.
You've got an important message because you speak about first responders, police officers, law enforcement, and some of the same problems, same issues that the military has to deal with, combat veterans, and you've seen both sides of that. What is the major problem that you're trying to solve right now? What are the issues that law enforcement and first responders are dealing with?
So I'm prior Air Force officer and also did 14 years civilian law enforcement after the military. And so I have perspective on both sides. And when I speak across the country, I do speak to both veterans, active military, all first responders, so firefighters, police officers, paramedics, dispatchers. And, ironically enough, I think the public as a whole accepts that our military members, especially our combat veterans, are more likely to have post-traumatic stress injury versus disorder, what I like to call it PTSI. But I think on the flip side of that, the general public does not equate post-traumatic stress with the jobs of being a first responder. And I'll give you just an example to illustrate what I'm talking about. So as a military member, and as you know, even in the military, a small percentage are actually combat veterans. There's many veterans who never go to combat, they never see combat. But when you are deployed to a combat area in the military, usually you know who the enemy is. There's, a known threat. There's a defined hostile area. And usually you're deployed to that area for a period of time, whether that's 6 months or a year. Maybe you do that once in your entire military career. Some people may do it 7, 8, or even more times than that, depending on their MOS or their specialty within the military. But when they leave those hostile areas, they're removed from that, dangerous environment with these known threats. They go back to their bases, whether it's overseas or statesides, go back to their families. And again, some military members don't even do that a single time. Now, if you look at our first responders, especially our law enforcement, our firefighters, we may be exposed to critical incidents every single day, sometimes multiple times a day throughout an entire career. And now an entire career could be 20 years. It could be even upwards of 30 years. And the reality is that as a law enforcement officer, we're in combat 24/7. There really is no safe area. There really is no, leaving that hostile area and going back to a safe environment because we're always at risk. We're always at threat. Every single contact that we have, every single call that we respond to is a potential deadly or lethal threat. And I don't think, most of the public realizes the toll of that. And, having done both, it's a reality that we see and deal with things that most people should never or will never have to deal with. And I don't, it's hard to find the exact statistics, but based on my experience, my own experience talking to other people through my volunteer work, my research, an average normal person, they may have 1 to 2 traumatic incidents in an entire lifetime. But again, as first responders, we may have 2 or 3 in a single shift or a single day. And when you're talking about an entire career, you're talking upwards of 800, maybe even over 1,000 critical incidents in your career. Now, much like the military, first responders, and this starts in the academy, just like it starts in boot camp in the military. We're trained to be these invincible warriors who run towards danger when everybody else is running away from it. But we don't talk about our emotions. We don't talk about our feelings, because that's looked at as being weak. It's looked at as being shameful. And so as we're dealing with these repeated critical incidents over our careers, we never truly process them. We never deal with them. We never talk about them. We just hold them inside until it gets to a breaking point. And if you equate it, it's kind of like a jar. Like when we start our careers, whether it's in the military or as first responders, we have these jars with a few things in it, from childhood, from just life in general. And as we go out through our career, it builds up, and that jar starts to fill. And if we're not talking about things, we're not dealing or processing these traumas, eventually our jar is going to overflow, and it's going to get to that breaking point. Now, for me, I had served 6.5 years in the military. After that, 14 years in law enforcement, and about 8 years into my civilian police career, I was involved in a fatal shooting. And that was my breaking point, or my tipping point. And that's really where my story, my mission, my purpose, that's really where it all started.
As law enforcement, you're dealing with often dealing with the same things that combat veterans deal with, or you don't know who the enemy could potentially be. They're all dressed just like everybody else. Whereas on the battlefield, hopefully they're wearing a uniform that says enemy. Maybe not so much in recent years. That strength, you're expected to be the protector, the shield, the warrior. And to admit that things get to you. That you have fear, that you have vulnerabilities, like you said, seen as weakness. So you hold it in and you remain silent. So that builds up over time. What was the incident like for you that kind of pushed you over the edge? That was it 2012 shooting? And
I won't go into great detail about it. I talk about it extensively in my book, Relentless Courage. But to give you a brief synopsis, at that point, again, I'd had 8 years in civilian law enforcement. I was working in a police department in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'd had several assignments, from just patrol officer to a field training officer. I was detective. I was actually undercover for 2 years on a California state drug task force. And eventually I was promoted to the rank of sergeant. And so I was running a patrol team on the streets. And at that time, I was working the graveyard shift or the night shift. And this particular incident my shift started the day after Christmas, so December 26, 2012. And it went into the next morning, December 27th. And pretty much I was 4 hours from going off duty, going home to see my family, my wife and my daughter. And a call came out that there was a woman inside a condominium and a man armed with a knife. And so I arrived first on scene with another officer. We started running towards these blood-curdling screams. We eventually found that one of the large windows to the residence was smashed in. We eventually went in, made ourselves known, and we were at the bottom of the stairs. And eventually a suspect came out at the top of the stairs holding a huge kitchen knife. If you've ever seen the Halloween movies or the Michael Myers movies, that's the exact knife that I'm talking about, that size of a knife. And he was trying to kill that couple that was barricaded inside their bedroom. And we got there, it turned his attention from them towards us, and he then tried to kill myself and my fellow officers. And unfortunately, we had to take his life, not only to save our own lives, but to save the lives of that couple inside that bedroom. And, I don't know why, but in that instance, in that moment, I lost that feeling of invincibility that I always had. I had it my entire military career. I was a Phoenix Raven. I was deployed to the Middle East. I was deployed to South America. I was all over Europe. And I never had lost that feeling of invincibility. I always had it. And even all my years up to this, being undercover, very dangerous job, targeting mid to high level drug dealers, including cartel members, never once did I lose that feeling. But in that moment, it was all just taken away. And the issue is that I never dealt with things up to that point. So that was my breaking point. I didn't establish a healthy communication with my wife at the time, talking about these things at work. When I came home pissed off in her bad mood, she was walking around on eggshells because she had no idea. She thought it was something she did. She had no idea that it was, something horrific that I had to see and deal with that day. From everything from fatal car accidents to child abuse to sexual assaults, homicides, suicides. These are all just the various types of calls and things that we're exposed to day in and day out. And so after that shooting, I went down a gradual downward spiral. And, I don't want people to think that, post-traumatic stress injury, it's not usually like there's one incident and the next day you wake up and you're just a mess. And for me, it was more of a gradual process, but I noticed immediately that something was different, something was off. And instead of using positive coping mechanisms to deal with it, I started using negative coping mechanisms, like drinking too much, trying to drink myself to sleep, hoping that this was some nightmare, that it wasn't real, started isolating, started pushing my family members, my friends away, didn't really want to be around anyone, didn't want to go to social events, literally just want to be by myself. And so that eventually led to many other things happening in my life. And it got to the point where I didn't want to be here anymore. I literally started putting myself in dangerous situations at work, hoping that I got killed in the line of duty.
You also mentioned, like you said, that isolation, but it kind of goes both ways because there's the actual incidents, the trauma experience that's witnessed or on the job. But then, what is it that it's again that bravado or there's a betrayal, abandonment you've spoken about within the brotherhood. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how you say that can be even more traumatic than the actual incident?
Absolutely. So I call it administrative betrayal or institutional betrayal. And ironically enough, this is the subject or the topic that has resonated most with readers of my book, Relentless Courage. I was very even hesitant to talk about this subject or this topic. And I'm so glad that I did, because it turns out that many of our first responders are dealing with, at some point in their career, this institutional betrayal or administrative betrayal. And in my case, it was the point where I eventually got the strength and courage to ask for help. Literally, after suffering in silence for 4 years, my life just falling apart, losing everything. And initially, my agency was very supportive. They were getting me the resources. They were getting me the help I needed. But when my recovery wasn't quick enough for them, and when I wasn't back at work, they then started to turn their back on me through a series of events that, again, I go into great detail in my book. But this is where, I learned that all those years of dedication and service, it didn't matter. They either wanted me back right now on the job or they didn't want me at all. And when they turned their back on me, it really brought up some unresolved childhood trauma. And these are things as warriors we don't like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about childhood trauma, but childhood trauma is actually in many cases what draws us towards these careers, both in the military and as first responders. And in my case, I had a a biological father who was an alcoholic. He was a drug addict. I had a great mother. I had a great stepfather. I had a great upbringing. But I didn't realize that I had some abandonment issues from my father when I was an early teenager, because I never dealt with that. I never processed it. I literally just pushed it away. I forgot about it. And so eventually, I graduate college, I go into the military, then I go into the police force, and I find this new great family, this blue family, where everything's great until it isn't. And so when my blue family eventually turned their back on me, it compounded all that trauma. So in my case, I had the childhood trauma, I had the workplace or the battlefield trauma on top of that. And then the third layer is that institutional or administrative betrayal. And in my humble opinion, that third layer is often what pushes us over the edge into suicide. It's what hurts us most. And I'm not diminishing, all the things that we see on the battlefield or on the streets as a first responder, because that absolutely does take a toll. It takes a tremendous toll. But that final tipping point is when we're finally trying to deal with that. When we finally got the strength and courage, as hard as it was to finally ask for help. And then when we get abandoned or put out on an island, when we're looking for that support from our quote unquote family members, it's that just hits us straight to the heart and soul.
It's like being stuck between a rock and a hard place. You've got not only often, like you said, the childhood trauma, right? You experience, and perhaps a hole you're trying to fill with your own service. And then the more immediate, more recent traumas of actually being on the job. Then when you try to fix it, maybe on your own or through other methods, you've got the institution on the other side. What's supposed to be your support system, I don't know, imagine thinking you've lost your edge, lost your nerve. What are some of the solutions there? Like what's the answer? How do we start fixing, I don't know, the individual? How do we start fixing the system?
Well, it's a very complex question, and there's a lot to it, and I'll try to briefly cover what I can. But what I want people to know is that, recovery is different for everybody. And I think the most important thing is that you have to have an open mind, and you have to be willing to try new and different things, and also realize that not everything works for everybody. And so in my personal recovery journey, one of the biggest things was learning that I truly wasn't alone, learning that I had brothers and sisters out there in the first responder service who had been through what I'd been through or been through similar things and were feeling the same thoughts and going through the same effects at home with their family and their loved ones, and seeing people how they'd overcome these things and come out healthy on the other side. So for me, initially, getting a culturally competent clinician or therapist was absolutely key. And what I mean by that is whether it's a psychologist or a licensed clinical therapist whose expertise is dealing with military members and or first responders, because we really are unique and we really need professionals who understand the uniqueness of our jobs and the things that we have to deal with and the impacts on us. I've heard time and time again of people who have gone to just random marriage family therapists who have no experience at all with military members or first responders, and they end up leaving that first session or that first meeting worse off than they were before they walked in that door, and they vowed to never, ever go back to therapy again. And so in my case, I found somebody who truly was an expert and truly culturally competent. And she told me about these meetings, these peer meetings, which I'd never heard of. They're private, confidential, free meetings. They have them all over the United States They're only open to first responders, whether you're active, retired, out on injury, and they're just discussion meetings. And so I started going to these meetings. And again, I met people who were just being fully open. They were being vulnerable. They were being transparent. And that gave me the strength and courage to also do that in this group setting. And ironically enough, I always think about this because in my law enforcement agency, I had brothers and sisters there who I trusted with my life. Like I knew if there was an active shooter situation or any dangerous situation for that matter, that they would be with me, that they would have my back, that we would both be running towards danger. But to this day, I don't understand why it was that I couldn't open up to a single one of them. I couldn't be real. I couldn't be honest. I couldn't be vulnerable about the things I was going through and the feelings that I was having. And so when I went to these meetings, I quickly learned that, the way I was feeling was actually normal. The things I was going through was normal, given all the abnormal things that we've had to see and deal with. And after that, I went through the West Coast post-trauma retreat, which I volunteer at now. It's a week-long residential retreat only for first responders, and it deals with post-traumatic stress injury. But I also learned in this recovery process that there's countless programs out there for military members, whether you're active, you're a veteran, for first responders, Mighty Oaks Foundation, Save a Warrior, Mission 22. We have a whole entire list of resources in the back of our book, but literally there are hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of different resources out there for our military members and first responders. And again, I didn't know about any of these things until I started going through my own recovery process. But I will tell you, the other side of this is we have to change the culture. We have to make it okay to not be okay. We have to make it okay to ask for help when we need it most, and not to be penalized, not to be put down, not to be judged, not to have our careers put at risk or put in jeopardy. And so we need our leaders at all levels in all of our first responder agencies, so our fire departments, our police departments, we need them to be open, honest, and vulnerable themselves. We need them to show the human side behind the badge. Because if we want our people, our subordinates or our peers to open up to us when they need it most, we have to first be willing to do the same. And it's amazing. I'll tell you, I speak all across the country. I do podcast interviews all over the world. I just got back from New York. And every time I speak, there'll be a line of people who come up to me afterwards and start sharing their personal stories and their personal experiences with me. I mean, things that they haven't shared sometimes with anybody else, not even their own spouses, not any of their coworkers at work. But yet here I am, some stranger that flew across the country, but I'm opening and bearing my heart and soul. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. By doing that, and I'm leading by example, I'm showing them that, you know what, my story is also their story. And they know that they can trust me. They can be open, honest, and vulnerable, and I'm not going to look down upon them. I'm not going to judge them. If anything, I'm going to embrace them and support them as much as I can. And that's exactly what we need our leaders to do, both in the military and both in the first responder services.
I know you've served on both sides, military and civilian law enforcement. And I know it's, at least in the military, we do preventive maintenance checks on all of our equipment. And we make sure that before we leave the wire, we've got a full tank of gas. We've got all the ammunition we need, all of our weapons and radio equipment. Everything is in proper working condition. And we do physical fitness tests, and we do PT on a regular basis. And for some reason, it's as if doing the same kind of mental and emotional checkups is taboo. When you joined the military right about the same time I did. I was in, I joined in 99. I think you're 98, right?
Correct. 98.
Was it why the Air Force, and were you drawn to law enforcement in the Air Force? Or what brought you to the badge, first in the military and then into the civilian world?
Well, for me, it was my stepfather. So early on in my life, my stepfather married my mother, and he was a police officer at the time. And he was my hero. I looked up to him both physically, figuratively. He was a great husband to my mother. He was a great father to me. He truly was a role model and a mentor in all senses. And I was a police volunteer for his first police department, the Sausalito Police Department, when I was 8 years old. And he ended up switching departments, went to Richmond PD, also here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I was a police explorer in high school. And I knew from that moment that that's what I wanted. But initially, I wanted to go into federal law enforcement. And to do that, you have to have a college degree, and you also have to have, work experience, like related experience. And so I looked into the military, I looked into a scholarship, and the Air Force offered me a full scholarship to California State University. I majored in criminal justice, I minored in psychology, and my plan was to go in, do my minimum 4 years after I graduated, when I got commissioned as a second lieutenant, get out and go into the DEA or the Marshals or the FBI. And a lot of things changed. A lot of things happened. First and foremost, while I was in the military, I worked with a lot of different federal agencies. And I quickly realized that that really wasn't where I wanted to be. I really wanted to be out in the field, pushing a black and white patrol car, making contacts every single day. I didn't want to be stuck in an office. I literally wanted to be out in the field. But also, when I was fulfilling that 4-year commitment, I got offered Germany, which extended my time in the military. And when I was in Germany, 9/11 happened. And a few months after that, I found myself in the Middle East. And I ended up staying in 6.5 years instead of 4 years. And when I got stationed back here at Travis Air Force Base in California, I started applying to different police departments here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I ended up getting picked up by the Walnut Creek Police Department. So for me, it really was in my blood since I was 8 years old. And it really was because of my stepfather. He's the one that my book is dedicated to. And unfortunately, he's no longer with us. He actually passed away at the age of 58 to work-related cancer. And it absolutely devastated me. And that happened at the height of my trauma. After my shooting, going through my divorce, going through a federal lawsuit, I literally lost my hero, my everything. And today, I truly try to honor him and his memory by doing this work that I do, because I also know that, when he became a police officer, he first went in the 1980s, and he never talked about, the feelings and the emotions and the horrific things that he saw at work, at least not in a traumatic way, not in the way that it affected him. And I look back now as a father, now as a grown man, and just seeing the impact that our profession had on my father. He worked homicide for many, many, many years in Richmond, California, one of the most dangerous cities in the entire United States. And I look back and just, seeing what a great father, husband to my mother he was, father to my brothers, and it blows me away. It absolutely blows me away of what he endured and what he went through. And so I'm here to honor his memory and to try and help and save as many lives as I possibly can by showing people that you're not alone, that there is hope, and that there is help out there.
I have a good friend who was a master at arms in the Navy. And I asked him why he didn't go into civilian law enforcement. He said something about it not translating. It's two very different jobs. Did you experience that? Did you go through the police academy? Was it different for you with your experience than coming straight from civilian life?
It's very
By the
different.
way,
I mean, it's
by the way, I was just picturing. By the way, I was just imagining you as a kid as like the hall monitor in school, like the classroom snitch. Anyways, please go ahead. I'm sorry.
the funny thing is, it was probably the opposite of that. I was probably the one breaking all the rules. So, and oftentimes that actually makes us better at what we do. So, no, I wasn't the perfect child. I may have presented that front and that image, but no, I was definitely far from perfect. And hall monitor, heck no, no, thank you. So yeah, the civilian law enforcement and military law enforcement is so different. And I will tell you that my law enforcement training and experience, I think, did help me both in the police academy and as a civilian police officer. But the thing is that, the military, yeah, on bases, we have lots of civilians that work on base. We've got family members. We have shopping centers, gas stations, bowling alleys, recreation centers. It's like a mini city, right? But the thing is, most people in the military, they believe in order. They believe in the chain of command. And if you outrank somebody or you have authority over them, most people, they're yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. They follow orders. They follow instructions. When you're out in the civilian world, it doesn't work that way. And most people don't want to listen to you. They don't want to follow your orders. They may attack you. They may want to fight you. And just the sheer volume of calls, especially traumatic calls, I mean, there is no comparison. I mean, I'll tell you, when I was in the military, I went to a few suicides. I went to some domestic violences. I did traffic stops. I did these things. But I would say, in all fairness, that in 6 months of my civilian law enforcement career, I saw far more and did far more than I did in 6.5 years in my entire military career. And I will also tell you that I've seen, like your friend talked about, is that a lot of people have a hard time adjusting from military law enforcement to civilian law enforcement. You really have to, I don't want to say forget about, how things worked on base, but you really have to relearn a whole new system. And a whole new system of laws. Like in my case, California law is much different than the military code of justice. It's so much different, and there's so much more to learn. And so I really think that there's no comparison whatsoever.
Were you able to come in at, say, a higher rank or experience level because of your military experience?
No. So I had
Did you
to
have
start
some kind of leg
at the
up
beginning,
on everybody else?
No. So I started the police academy like everybody else. In fact, some of our drill instructors who were law enforcement, they were former enlisted Marines. So you could find out, when they had an Air Force captain in their police academy class, I probably got it worse than a lot of the other people. So I didn't have it easier. I had to do the same things. I had to go through the same training process. When you graduate the police academy, you have to go through the field training program where you get teamed up with more veteran officers. And again, you have to learn this whole new system, not just the system of laws, but you have to learn this new city. You have to learn the geography. You have to learn the streets, the businesses. But you also have to learn how to deal with and talk to people on the street, not just criminals, but victims, suspects, just ordinary citizens and business owners. And so there is a steep learning curve. But I will say that I think because of my education and my military experience, and let's face it, my real world experience from living all over the world, I think that helped me get special assignments and get promoted quicker because I was made a field training officer very quickly. I was made detective again very quickly, and I was promoted at that time to the rank of sergeant faster than anybody had at that point in my department. So again, nothing was given to me. It had to be earned. But I do think because of my life experience and military experience, I was able to move through the ranks quicker.
Are you seeing, I know everybody says, our generation had it harder or we did it better. and the next generation are weak, things like that. Are you seeing differences in those that are going through the police academy and coming up through the ranks now? Is there a problem with maybe the older generation of law enforcement? Because I know in the military, it was all about, hard work, get that rank up, and then it was about teaching and mentoring the next, those behind us. What's going on in the police world when it comes to that?
Well, I'll tell you, first off, I learned in the law enforcement world that it's not as close and as tight-knit as the military. I would say it's much more cutthroat and each your own. It's very competitive. In the military, I felt much more of a brotherhood, a family environment. I felt much more connected and closer to the people that I worked with. In fact, some of my best friends today are people that I served with in the military and not in law enforcement. Remember, law enforcement is paramilitary, so it's different. We don't deploy together. We don't go TDY together. We're not going, we are in combat every single day, but we're not getting deployed downrange together. There's just a lot of differences. There's similarities, but there's a lot of differences. And I think, when I first started in civilian law enforcement, like you said, there was this ethic and this ethos that, you had to work to get what you wanted. You had to earn it. Nothing was given. And unfortunately, in today's generation, I see a lot of people come in very new, maybe they've been out of the academy for 6 months and they already want to be on the SWAT team or they want to be a homicide detective. And, historically, these are things that took many, many years, many years of proving yourself, of experience, of gaining knowledge, gaining insight, gaining maturity to achieve these specialized assignments. That's one side. But I also know that most every law enforcement agency, especially here in California, is very understaffed because people simply don't want to do the job anymore. There's a lot of factors for that, but you have a lack of support at all levels. We've seen probably in the last decade a movement against law enforcement where politicians, whether that be at the state level, the county level, the city level, have really come down on our law enforcement members and have not given them the support and the resources that they need. And I've seen time and time again where police officers, good officers who are doing their job correctly, are being put through extensive IA investigations because of citizen complaints. They're being sued. They're having charges filed against them, criminal charges filed by the district attorneys for use of force when they literally had to defend their life or save the lives of other people. And so you're really seeing a shift in when I first started, there was a very big support, a community support for our law enforcement members. They were held up high. They were respected. That most people listen to you, but now things have really shifted. And so I've seen really a change in the proactivity of law enforcement officers. Like when I was a cop, I was doing traffic stops, car stops, pedestrian stops, bicycle stops, nonstop, because I was trying to arrest criminals, get bad guys off the street, take guns and drugs off the streets. But now you're seeing police officers be more reactive as opposed to proactive. I equate it to like waiting for someone to call 911 and responding to that call instead of being out there proactively and trying to, prevent crime before it actually happens, to, arrest criminals and take them off the street and hold them accountable. And so really, there's a lot of factors to this, but I think things have really changed in the world of law enforcement. Many, I think, not for the better. But one of the things that I think has changed for the better is that I think this new generation is much more likely to open up and talk about their feelings and talk about their emotions when they need to. I think because, not only is the training starting to get better, but I also think just because of the way they've been raised and how our society is today.
Well, it seems like a perfect storm of challenges from civilian leadership, councils and mayors. We just had that a New York City election where the mayor wants to replace the police force with social workers and have dispatchers decide who gets sent where based on a 911 call. I don't know. And then in the last few years with BLM riots and Antifa and cities, even governors ordering, police to not work with federal agents, and all the time, even the population. Anytime a police officer comes around to enforce the law, cameras come out, phones come out, and they've got to walk a pretty fine line, and it's a zigzag line. It just seems like I can't imagine how they would want to continue that job, except for the fact that it is absolutely necessary, and they recognize that. But then, like you were talking about this, latest generation coming in and maybe feeling a bit entitled. Like, I don't want to put in the work to get the recognition or get the responsibility. I want, finishing the academy and saying, I want to work homicide. I want to become a detective. I don't want to be a patrol officer. Those are it's a pretty tough cocktail there to navigate. And the whole while you've got the health, the mental health issues to deal with. How do you navigate that yourself?
And I think also the other problem, which is all intertwined with this, is that our agency chiefs, our police chiefs, our fire chiefs have become politicians themselves, because many of them are at-will employees. They're working for the city council or the city manager, and they can literally be let go at any time. And so we have a real lack of supportive leadership, people who are willing to step out and put themselves on the line for their people. They're walking this fine line of where they're trying to take care of their people, but they're also trying to appease the city or the county or the state government, to do their job. So that's definitely a real challenge.
There's a common, that was something that I read in, was it John Boyd's book, Fighter Pilot, or a biography. He was something that is an Air Force fighter pilot that would say you have a choice to make. You could be a beer or a doer, right? And the beers, they go straight to the officer ranks, right? The general officer ranks, they become the politicians. They want to be somebody. The doers are the ones that roll up their sleeves, and they're the ones that are the defenders. So it's up to, say, the sergeants, the detectives, the ones that really carry the force. Like basic training gets you in police academy gets you the basic knowledge to do the job. But it's really when you get to your station, your unit, you get that training officer and you really, put on the badge and do the job. Then that's where you learn. That's how you become, the doer. Sorry. So who's going to be doing that if more and more police officers are retiring?
That's a great question. And honestly, it scares me. It really does. And I don't have an answer for that, because I think, if we want more people to consider doing this job, and for me, it wasn't a job, it was a calling. For me, it was an absolute calling, something I wanted to do since I was a child. And I think in my generation, most of the people that went into law enforcement, it was also a calling for them. But I think now, again, we're short on applicants. Even the ones that we're getting 10 years ago would have never gotten hired. They would have never passed backgrounds. They would have never even gotten a first look. You have people now looking at a police officer job, just looking at the pay and the benefits, going, oh, okay, this is, job security, there's retirement, good medical. I'll give this a try. Like, why not? Like, these are people that have never even thought about public service. They really don't even know what it entails, but they look on the paper and go, wow, this pay and benefit looks great. So let me sign up for this. And, those aren't the people that we need or want. We need the people that this is in their heart and soul, that they truly want to make a difference. They want to make this world a better place. Those are the kinds of people that we need. And until we show that we actually support our law enforcement, and then again, I think it's gotten better over the last year or so. I think the support is becoming stronger in some areas. But again, as you're seeing in places like New York, it's not. You're getting these people elected who don't believe in law enforcement. They're taking school resource officers away from our schools, which those officers there to protect, our children. I mean, the most valuable, important things that we have in our life, and they're taken away from the schools because of how it looks or how it's perceived. And so, we really, unfortunately, it has to get worse before it gets better. And that's kind of how you look at it, is some of these communities where they started taking the officers away from schools, or they started cutting, staff or positions. Well, guess what? Crime went up, assaults went up, homicides went up. People aren't happy. People don't feel safe in their own communities. Well, guess what? That's because we need law enforcement officers. There is true evil in this world. There is no doubt about that. And when you call 911, law enforcement is it. That's the last line. Like, nobody else is coming. Again, when everybody's running away from that danger, we're the only ones that are running towards it. And so we have to do something. We have to change how we look at and view our law enforcement officers. And again, my fear is that by us lowering the standards and hiring these people that really have no business in law enforcement, there's going to be a domino effect, whether it's days, months from now, years from now, of bad use of force incidents, bad shootings, corruption. I mean, all kinds of things. And they're going to look back and say, yep, this person should have never been hired as a police officer. And so it's important that we hold these standards. As difficult as that is, I would rather have less cops, but have them qualified, have the right heart, have the right motivation, than a bunch of cops who are poorly trained, who don't want to be on the job, who have ill intentions, because that's only going to create disaster down the road.
It's a pretty scary picture. I've got 3 boys. A teenager who, I ask all of them what they want to be when they grow up. The teenager, of course, he wants to be a professional lacrosse player. Okay, but you'll still study. You still have to do well in geometry. But the twins are 6 years old, and it's always fireman, policeman, or garbage man, but they're boys. The police officer, the policeman is an icon. Is there? That's we when we're kids, we aspire to be the hero. Is there some ray of hope? Is there something good you're seeing beyond all this miasma of challenges that police officers, law enforcement is facing right now? Are you seeing something that'll give us a little bit hope for a change in the future?
Well, I think you're seeing a shift in the focus on mental health, on resiliency, on wellness. And I think that's important because I think it makes for a much better person, a much better first responder, a much better police officer. It makes them more empathetic, sympathetic. Ironically enough, I'm not on the job anymore, but I look back now, I look at my recovery process from post-traumatic stress injury, and I think, had I gone through all those things before and remained on the job, I think I would be a much better police officer today than I was when I first started, because I was a very black and white person. And I don't mean that by ethnicity or race. I mean that by, if you broke the law, I didn't care why. I didn't care what the circumstances were, what the reasons were behind it. I'm just, writing you a ticket. I'm towing your car. I'm taking you to jail. Whereas now, I look at everybody differently, and I realize that, we all have our own life experiences. We all have our own trauma. We all have our own stressors and things that we're dealing with. Even things like addiction and alcoholism, I look at those things totally differently now. And I think that's important. I think that we need our police officers to acknowledge their feelings, to acknowledge their emotions, and really just show the humanity, and the human behind the badge. And I think that's the one bright side, is I think that we are making headroom in that area. I think there's a lot more work to be done, but I do think that there are improvements, and I think you're going to see a positive domino effect in that regard.
I do appreciate that and appreciate your time. I think this is a perfect time to transition into the countdown to impact. It's 3 books, 2 quotes, and 1 person have all made an impact in your life.
Well, my stepfather, his name was Michael Gormley, and he's a retired police lieutenant from the Richmond Police Department. And I would say that he was the most important man in my entire life. And he is the one who taught me how to be a father, who taught me how to be a good partner. And he's the sole reason why I went into law enforcement. As far as books, my book, Relentless Courage, Winning the Battle Against Frontline Trauma, I think there's no other book like it in the world, and it's absolutely saving lives. Of course, it's saving relationships, it's saving careers, but it's absolutely saving lives every single day. The man who wrote the foreword to my book, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, his book on killing, I think, is one of the most important books that I think everyone needs to absolutely read. And, to have him write the foreword for our book, what an honor. What an absolute honor. Because I look up to him, and I've seen him speak a couple times, and he's really one of the first pioneers in the area of resiliency and wellness among our warriors, our military members, our first responders. My co-author, Dr. Shauna Springer, Doc Springer, she wrote a book called Warrior before we published Relentless Courage. And again, I highly, highly encourage anyone who has served in the military, who knows someone who has served in the military, any family member, loved one, to read Warrior. Absolutely phenomenal book. And the last book would be Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement. Again, this book has been out for many, many years, and Dr. Gil Martin is one of the first people that I've ever seen really open up and expose the harsh realities of the job of being a first responder and the impact on our physical health, on our mental health, on our loved ones, our family members. And so those 3 books would be my recommendation for anyone watching or listening to this interview to make sure you read those. Terrific.
We've got 3 books. I think you mentioned 1 person. What about 2 quotes or rules of thumb you live by that made an impact in your life?
Well, the term that I use pretty much every day, all day, is smash the stigma. If we want to overcome this negativity and shame behind talking about our feelings, emotions, mental health, we really have to just destroy, smash the stigma around it. And the only way we're going to do that is by having conversations like you and I are having today, by showing, that we are human, that we are open, we're honest, we're vulnerable, and that we care. We care, we have families. I mean, we're human. We're not perfect. We make mistakes, but we've got to smash that stigma. And, something I live by today is just living life to the fullest. I learned that life can be taken away in literally a millisecond. And I went from having a fear of dying, but also wanting to die at the same time, purposely putting myself in dangerous situations, hoping I got killed in the line of duty. And thank God I raised my hand and asked for help, because I wouldn't be here today if I had not done that. And so now, as I sit here today, I truly try to live life to the fullest, to have gratitude every single day. It may be difficult. Some days are harder than others, but I think it's truly important to look at yourself, to look at your day, and every single day, just think of 3 positive things. End your day with 3 positive things that happened that day. And let's start to live life to the fullest again.
Daily gratitude practice is very powerful. I do it myself. Michael, the final 2 questions, real quick. One, where can people find out more about you if they want to carry on and continue this?
So I'm all over social media. Just type in Sergeant Michael Sugrue, Sugrue. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok, Truth, Parler, LinkedIn. I mean, you name it. I'm seriously on every single platform. I check my messages daily. As far as my book, Relentless Courage, Winning the Battle Against Frontline Trauma, I assure you that this book, there is no other book like it in the entire world. You can find it online at Amazon. It's available in hardcover, paperback, Kindle. It's also on Audible. And you can also find it online at Walmart.com and Barnes & Noble. But if you do read or listen to Relentless Courage, please reach out to me. I personally want to hear your thoughts, because I know this book will absolutely change your life as you know it.
I will get all of those links into the show notes so people can find you and find your book. The last question, what does living a life of impact mean to you?
To me, it's what gives me purpose. It's what gets me out of bed every single day. My sole focus in life is to positively impact as many people as I can. And with that, again, domino effect. When you affect one person positively, that person then can affect other people and their lives positively. So just remember that every contact that we have every single day, it can be either negative or it can be extremely positive. And I choose to make it extremely positive.
Michael, thank you very much for sharing your experience and your expertise and insight into what's plaguing, what's the concerns among the law enforcement world and first responders. I think we need to really pay attention, and we need to turn a few things around. So I appreciate your service in each of your uniforms and what you're doing today. Thank you very much.